Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Boston Children's Hospital second part of our series on back to school and how parents can help their kids reduce stress as they return to school. We've got two great guests, Marcus Cherry and Shella Dennery. And I'm just thrilled that you guys are here because you're the experts, and we're going to have a lot of people submitting questions as well. First of all, why don't you just introduce yourselves and maybe talk about your background?
I'm Dr. Marcus Cherry. I am a senior attending psychologist in the outpatient psychiatry system in the Department of Psychiatry.
Great.
And also the attending psychologist for the adolescent weight loss surgery program.
Amazing. And Shella?
I'm Dr. Shella Dennery, and I am the director of the Boston Children's Hospital Neighborhood Partnerships Program, which is a school mental health program that partners with the Boston Public Schools.
Great. So for this next half hour or so, we're going to talk about academic stress, social anxiety, peer pressure, school safety, and burnout. And I think these are all important things. I'm excited because I have college kids who are also experiencing this, and for parents, certainly they also are experiencing stress. So I think what we're going to talk about is going to be applicable to many generations. So why don't we just start talking about what are some tips for families and students to think about as they're back to school, and certainly they're facing new challenges that they haven't faced in a while. What are some basic tips that parents should think about?
So before we launch right into this topic on stress and
Yes.
mental health, I just want to say thanks to the hospital for sponsoring an event that talks about these things.
Yeah.
Because I think the more that kids and families can openly have these conversations, I think the better. There's still a great deal of stigma around these topics. So a lot of appreciation there. And then just want to call out my colleague here. We met 21 years ago when I first started here, and he's one of the first people I met. So it's just an honor and privilege to be here with
Absolutely.
you and have this conversation with someone like you. So
And you're dating me, so that's okay.
I'm dating myself as well. We've been here at the hospital quite some time. So happy to be here. But I think, one of the things we always want to talk about before we talk about these topics is really just how normal mental and behavioral health is in every family, right? It's all of us have it. And I think the more we can have conversations where we talk about this as part of our health, it's not separate. It's not something that someone else has. I think this is sort of our disclaimer, right? We start here. And really letting families know that it's in every house. It's in every community. It's in every extended family. And so the more we can sort of normalize, a lot of people I think are struggling alone and they're worried about their kids or they're worried about what's happening for their children at school and at home. And we want to just sort of put the message out there that people are not alone in this, and that the more we can sort of think about this more globally, the better. So I know you asked a really good question, but I think to start
I love that
just thinking
opening.
about we really need to normalize mental health.
Yeah.
And I think, jumping off it, I think one of the things we want to do in terms of tips is families are already sort of transitioning their kids to school. So making sure your kids are getting good appetite, they're sleeping, they are having some downtime, they're doing all those things that they normally might do, but they're doing them as they're transitioning to school. I think talking about stress, one of the things that helps families is getting back into their school time routines.
Yeah.
Right. And I think so the summertime is usually a little bit unstructured. But as we get back into school, every family has a rhythm to themselves. It's sort of fast, slow, in between. And so getting back into that school routine that you have for the morning, for your children, for your adolescents, whatever that looks like, and whatever the goal is, keep the goal small. So sometimes the goal is to sort of obviously take care of yourself, but moving them out the door. And then and kids do well and their stress goes down when they know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Right. When they know the lay of the land, and I think so that as they transition to school, the other piece is the evening routine. So again, every family has a rhythm. Every family has different parts to that, but whatever it is, kids knowing what that routine is, they knowing the structure of it, whether you do snack before homework or homework before snack or whatever it is, you want to keep that routine. And then knowing that there are certain times where kids are making transitions where parents may need to tweak the routine a little bit and give it some time.
I like you say give it time because I think it's an adjustment period. I think everyone's got to recognize that it may be a week, it could be a month, but it's an adjustment period. And with adjustments, you have to kind of have a little flexibility.
And give your child or adolescent time to adjust. You
Yeah.
know, so there's going to be an adjustment period to new transitions in school and just school itself. So kids transitioning to middle school, they may have a little bit longer of a transition because it's a new place, new expectations, reconnecting with old kids, learning about new kids, as well as your transition to high school. Again, it's a new thing. So let them adjust and be there for them to sort of know how they're doing. One other way parents can sort of help their kids manage stress is to get connected to the schools.
Yeah.
So you know what's going on to a certain degree. All those things allow them to sort of settle. And also, as Shella mentioned, normalize. Things will settle as you start to get
Right.
into the flow.
It will get better.
They will get better.
I think I would add, I mean, I think it's always humbling to do talks like this because it's professional for us. This is what we do for a living. It's also personal. Like all of us at this table are parents as well. So
Right.
thinking about that. But some of the best advice, just to build on what Dr. Terry is saying, when I had my kids, was really think about how they wake up in the morning, think about how they go to bed at night, think about how they walk into a school building, and sort of thinking about low frustration and stress tolerance, and sort of making and creating spaces where those routines have to be there so that kids kind of know what to expect. But I think there's also so many things that we can do to sort of prepare them for the day and get them ready for things as well. So I think that's really important.
And anything again within the space of your home that you can do the night before tends to be really helpful for kids
Yeah.
in terms of the younger they are, you're going to probably doing more. The older they are, you're going to be collaborating with what's going to help you sort of move through your morning easier so you don't have any frustration, as well as the evening, doing the same types of activities. Either you're as with a younger kid doing more of that, or with an older kid collaborating. How do we make this, a little bit more seamless so there's not so much frustration or stress as much as there can be.
But I think before, sorry, Brian.
That's
I think
all right.
one of the
I love
things that we talk a lot about is, this topic of stress and anxiety is very prevalent right now. And I feel like a lot of parents are saying to us, it feels like anxiety is sort of in the air.
Yeah.
That it's, I think we've been through a very interesting time through a pandemic. Schools were closed, schools are back reopened. I think we've been sort of re-entering and things are sort of coming back to normal, but they still don't feel normal. And we know mental health rates are on the rise and needs are on the rise. So one of the things that, I just normalized mental health generally, but I also think stress and anxiety, we forget that they're very positive things and how much we need them.
Right.
And how they can fuel us and drive us. And so they're sort of a spectrum. And so I think when we're really thinking about these things as parents, when is it healthy stress and healthy anxiety? And when does it get into a place where we're concerned or worried? And then what do we do with those things when we get to those places as well?
And I think, I've been thinking about this a lot and preparing for this idea of, I have a test tomorrow, or I'm going to be doing something that is I haven't done in a while, and that's giving me stress as a kid. That anticipation and that anxiety is part of learning and being challenged mentally, and certainly if I'm doing sports as well in the afternoon, that's physical challenges, but it's all stress. And I like one of you said that think about the stress as the process rather than don't rush to the outcome. And I think that might be good advice for parents too, to think, as this is a, adjustment period, let's not jump to, why isn't my kid jumping out of bed so happy and, with butterflies and birds singing, like, this is the best day, Mom and Dad. Like, to know that this is going to might be slow going.
Yeah, I think it's sort of that engaging in the process and all those activities are really important rather than focusing on the outcomes.
Yeah.
And that also helps mitigate stress as well in terms of that test, right? So let's focus on, what helps us study for it, what you do with the teacher, and not so much on sort of focusing on the outcome. And that one test does not make the world. There's many of them. There's many opportunities to, even in an extracurricular activity, there's many parts to that. So engaging in the process and focusing on the here and now, and parents modeling that as well, and sort of talking through. So those things are really helpful too in terms of managing normalized stress, all right, and keeping it as low as we can.
And I think a lot of these things, we're not talking here about like rocket science, like really intense things. And I always want to remind parents that it's just about, even for myself, we always need these reminders, just these sort of just to ground us as we're parenting. But I think I like what you were saying about routines. And, we always think about the easy ones like sleep and nutrition and exercise, but also now like the screen time routines and when are things available and when are they not, and having some limits on that and figuring out what are healthy, healthy ways to sort of integrate that into our family lives. But I think the trickier part in these talks, I think, is really as adults, we can be here to talk about our kids and students, but it really is about us. And I think having all parents sort of take a look in the mirror and sort of think about how are we taking care of ourselves to be parents. And Marcus just said beautiful words about modeling. We are role models in so many ways. So am I on my phone every night? Am I like what is happening in my own family, and how do kids pick up on that? How do they sort of see from us what is acceptable, what isn't? And I think I really that airplane example is so overused, right? Like put your mask on first as an adult and then put it on the kids, and it's so corny, but it's actually so helpful. Like we really do need to be. What are we doing? Are we balanced? Do we have our routines? How are our kids seeing us engage in this world? And then I think just being that model is essential.
And then also modeling that we don't get it right every time the first time.
Listen,
we're not perfect. And that, we are learning always from tweaking our routines, learning how to put the phone down and settling and being aware of those things. So we're not perfect adults and parents all the time.
And I wonder, I'm sure you have great conversations with parents who say, I'm so embarrassed. I really yelled at my kid this morning. He didn't have his uniform. He forgot. He said he had a test, or he had a paper due. He didn't do it, or an assignment was missed, and I just, snapped. And I'm embarrassed, and this is not the role modeling that I want to show, but in the moment it just happened. And, talk about that. How do you kind of help parents have grace?
I think, parents are human beings like everybody else.
Right.
And so we are always, some days we're going to be on our game, and some days we're trying to move things. So it's not the worst thing to sort of have a rough day with your child in the morning when things don't go well.
Right.
There's always another time to manage and figure out what we as a family could have done differently to sort of support that. And also knowing that, kids aren't always going to be perfect all the time.
Right.
And that's how kids learn, right? If we forgot something, so what do we do next time so that we don't? If we didn't do as well as we wanted to, right? How do we do? What are the things we can do to help you do as well as you'd like to do? Staying away from perfection, but again, it's a broken record, but engaging in the process, modeling, and helping your child problem solve. And again, you go back to we're human. We're not always going to be perfect and smiley every day.
Right.
We're gonna express our frustration, and in that example, you express some frustration.
Right.
And that's okay.
And then maybe follow up with your kid at the end of the day, like, hey, this happened this morning. I'm not proud of it, and to kind of break it down, maybe.
Yeah. I think that's really important. Some things that Marcus says often is how important it is to be like present and available as a parent, and that's so much easier said than done, right? I love this question because I'm a pretty open human and share the struggles, the reality of being a parent, and I think the more that people can know that they're also not alone in that space. Like it's not like it's always smooth sailing, and when things do go wrong, though, I think Brian, what you just said is sometimes the things that we forget to do. Like we're also modeling how to say like, hey, I'm sorry about this morning.
Right.
Like I'm sorry that I asked you in that way to get ready, and tomorrow I'll work on that. But I also think it's moments to be saying to your kids, like, I don't want to ask you 5 times.
Right.
So when I ask you maybe on the third, having real conversations about what pushes our buttons and what pushes theirs. But I think it's really powerful to have an adult apologize also and to model that. I think we're in a world right now where that doesn't happen as often as it should, right? And so just having that humanity in your household about we're all making mistakes, we're all screwing up, we're doing the best we can. and let's see how we can do better tomorrow.
Right.
Especially at the beginning of the school year.
Right.
As
Everything
and
is
mentioned
so
before, everything is so new.
Yep.
Everybody's lives are transitioning and changing. Parents are now managing multiple things depending on their families. Kids are now managing multiple things. So really giving the family time to sort of move into their rhythm, and giving yourself a pat on the back for the really wonderful things you do, the small victories that we have throughout the day. And then again, that may be, sometimes that's just getting out of the door,
right.
getting into the car, getting in the bus and going, yes, as well as settling your one for bed at night, whatever that is. Those are victories. Those are wins. And then one other thing I would say is that there's another day.
Right.
The next day. That happened yesterday. Now we're on the next day. And that's great.
So can I ask this? I struggled with this. At the end of the day, you see your kid. How was your day? Fine. Okay. And I'm like, so, I mean, I've heard people, did you help someone today? Or were you nice to someone today? Like, what are some suggestions to, like, let's have a conversation about how your day went? Mm-hmm. And I just think it's really a challenge for parents to get them to open up.
Yeah, I think so. Developmentally, I think we need to think about, your elementary school kid versus your middle school kid versus your high school kid. So they're going to give different levels of information.
Right.
Your younger kid is just going to go, they're going to give you a lot, even when you may not want it. And then as kids get older, they're moving more into the world of their peers. They may be more selective around the information they're given. I think, and Shella can comment, I am one that always is just making sure your kids know you're present, that you're interested, that you want to know. And then, we have to manage how we feel about the level of information we get back, right, depending on developmentally where they are. I don't know if you have other things.
Well, I also think it's developmental, and sometimes it can be gender. I mean, I have two boys at home, right? So I get that it was fine all the time.
Yes.
It was fine. It was good. I had a great day. And I think it's about being really creative. I think knowing that question you asked, Brian, most kids are going to say, it was fine, it was good.
Right.
Good. And sometimes I think that that's fine, and letting kids sort of decompress from their day. And, but I think there's really, the internet is amazing. There's all sorts of websites that have these creative questions you can ask your kids. So I often ask, who did you sit by at lunch
Yes.
today? What did you do at recess? Or just random things that aren't so, because then there's usually something there, to get some glimmer of the day. But yeah, I think that you just have to be creative and not, I think it's often too, when we say, how are you? People always just say,
right.
So that's not, I wouldn't lead with that, but sort of thinking about different parts of their day, or what was their favorite part of the day, or what did they eat? Sort of random things, right? But then you get them to start sharing more about what their day was like, what they were doing, who they did it with.
Yes.
And there may be particular times where they will give you more information than not.
Right.
I know, we both have kids. My wife, she used to get a lot of information on the way home from picking them up.
In the car.
I was
those are
like,
great.
what? But once they got home, nothing was happening. So there's always different times, and then other activities where you're around your kids. You'd be surprised around just being present and what happens.
Yeah. My middle schooler at bedtime, at bedtime, he just starts asking questions at bedtime, right? It's
So I think it's knowing when your child is ready to give information as well. And again, every family has their rhythm.
Right.
When information seeking is a good time and when it may not be the best time. So,
right.
But always making sure they know you're present, you want to know how they're doing, and you're there for them. Yeah.
And I think just being open, like Marcus said, and there's definitely nights where I don't want to sit on the couch and watch a cartoon that they're watching, but I will, right? And I think, just making those moments of physically being there, even though there might not be conversation happening as well, right?
Right.
Or walks, right? Going for walks. People often say that kids share more in the car because they're not looking at you directly.
Exactly.
So all of these key moments, and taking advantage of them.
Yeah.
They matter.
So what, so when should they be concerned that it's from a, this is awkward, or this didn't feel good, or this was really hard to I don't want to go back there, or I'm feeling really not welcome, or I'm feeling that my anxiety is really high because of this. So at what point should a parent say, now this doesn't feel right, or this doesn't sound right?
I was trying to make sure I understood the question.
Right.
Yeah.
No.
But I do think, I'll let Marcus share
No,
more, but
go
I
ahead.
think just initial thoughts. I think as a parent, many of us are really in this space of wondering what's typical and developmental and normal
Right.
versus what's concerning and troubling. And I think it's a fine line. And I think what also is really hard about this is our kids are ever evolving and changing from day to day, from week to week. And I don't want to dismiss there are kids with chronic mental health, more serious mental health conditions. But I do think for the parent who is wondering, this is not my professional voice, but my personal voice is maybe it's both. Like, trust your instincts. If you're worried about your
Right.
kid, or if something feels off, or you're wondering, that's a great time to sort of reach out and sort of ask others and get second opinions or get some consultation on what you're thinking. And I know schools, that's where I've spent most of my career is in school and school mental health. It's such a beautiful place because there's so many, like if your kid is in 5th grade, they're seeing all these 5th graders and they've probably seen what you're worried about before. And they can also give you some ideas about, wow, this is something that's very common
Right.
for 5th graders, or
Right.
actually it's not. And, let's see what else we can do and offer other suggestions.
No, absolutely. I think trusting parents know their kids.
Yeah.
You know them better than anybody else in the entire world. And so trust your gut, as Shella mentioned. I think development is very important as well. And so she's right. So teachers, guidance counselors, your primary care physician, they know what seems to be pretty much within the norm, and also when things seem to be a little bit askew, right? I think things we want to focus and pay attention to when you might want to move to that next step are any changes in their behavior, so, and I think about behavior in terms of it going on a lot of times, it's very frequent, it lasts a long time, and it seems very intense. So any changes in her appetite that you've noticed, any changes eating too much, too little, changes in their sleep. Kids aren't settling like they were, or they're waking up and they can't go to sleep, or they're waking up and they look really tired in the morning, any changes in their academic performance, either not engaging or it's going down, any changes in mood, sort of looking more cranky and irritable, are they snapping, are they sort of more reactive than they. And again, if you're at a 5, usually, that's okay. But if you're always at an 8,
Yeah.
something else might
Something's
be going
going
on. And we don't know what that is. Kids being tearful and sad, or regarding stress and anxiety, when that is starting to get in the way of what they typically should be doing, and that could be what we're talking about, like getting out the door, getting into school. So those type of things you want to pay attention to, including concerning serious mental health concerns, and those may be opportunities to, talk to your guidance counselor, reach out to a teacher to see, what's going on, talk to your primary care physician.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting to do talks for families on this topic because our mental health system, our behavioral health system is really hard to access
And navigate.
and and it is fragmented and broken. And all that said, there is some glimmers of hope on the horizon, and there are some new services and some things that I really want parents to know about because I think they are struggling to know. But Marcus is right. So I view this as like you're looking at a wall and there's a ton of doors you can open in this space. So if I'm a parent and I'm worried about my child, the first door I'm going to knock on is the school.
Yeah.
But I think what we need to acknowledge is not all schools have the same resources, same positions. So most schools have a nurse, a social worker, a psychologist, a guidance counselor. Some don't. So it depends on your zip code and your school district. So knowing your school, knowing who works at your school, who can you talk to in your school? Do they provide services at your school for all kids? Or do they have a partner? Do they contract out? Do they have a care coordinator, for example? So I think for parents to really think about their school as the doors I would always knock on first.
That is great.
But we can talk about the other doors in a minute that people should know about. But the other door, I think that people, there's a couple others that I'm going to talk about right now. Sorry, Marcus.
No,
You can talk about some doors.
These are
please.
But I think
important resources.
I do think a lot about, we were talking developmentally about kids, what age and stage they are, but their friends, their peer group, that is so essential and important. So like knocking on that door and ensuring that kids are connected to who they want to be connected to, that sometimes I think parents don't always know the other parents of other families, like sort of making a network of community, I think is one thing. And also that other door of like, it could be church, it could be sports, it could be community centers, it could be after school programs, sort of thinking about where else is my kid spending time, who are they spending time with, and what is positive there, or what is feeding them or fueling them in those spaces.
And have those supports or doors noticed any changes in your kid?
Right, like you said,
or are they doing just fine here? You're like, okay, all right.
Right.
So
Sometimes they do that. They're not fine at home and they're fine at school. It's very confusing.
It is confusing.
What she's talking about is getting, your concerns, and now you're starting to get information in the different places your wonderful kid is and where they are, as well as sort of, where can we sort of intervene if we need to, as well as, again, I always think the more information you have, the better off you can make really good decisions.
And I think, one tricky thing is we're in this medical model of care that really shares with parents that your kid the one thing that gets told is your kid needs counseling or your kid needs therapy individually. And so that's one solution. So that's why I'm a fan of having many doors, because that door doesn't fit for all kids and all families, depending on the type of therapy or the insurance or the access or the resource of that family. Some of this isn't always obtainable. So I'm someone who I really do view the school as a place that can be a resource and really supportive to kids. And they're there every day most of the time, right? But I do think thinking about different models of care, group therapy, for example, or community supports, or just having kids do other things, I think is really essential to this conversation. And us having a menu of different services that's available for kids. And I think we're moving that direction.
And I liked what you said about like your fifth grader at school. They see dozens and dozens of fifth graders, so there is kind of a outlook in terms of how your kid is doing versus lots of folks, or the after school program or the sports team, and just to raise those questions with those leaders of those programs to say, how is my kid?
How are we doing here?
How are we doing versus everyone else?
Yeah, absolutely. Or just how are we doing?
But Marcus, this is Marcus's words too, though. Marcus, you said recently, like, you don't want to go to the school in a crisis, though, or when it's like a problem. And so this idea of being a collaborator, it's the beginning of the school year. Like, have you met your kids' teachers? Is there an open house coming up soon?
Yes.
Can you make an effort to, connect if you are worried, right? Because you want to sort of build a relationship and a connection in advance.
It's funny you mention that, because one of the things I used to do when I went into my kids' schools is I was the drop-off person. I'd go introduce myself to the teachers when they had time, and I'd go, if you ever have any concerns about X or Z, give me a call.
Yeah.
They'll let me know. So I'm forming that collaboration, and they go, oh, okay, so
as opposed to waiting for the crisis.
Waiting for it too. So always sort of just being present, if you can be, and collaborating so that you can be aware that they are doing wonderfully, or aware if something has percolated and you want more information.
And times have changed. A middle school teacher texted me yesterday to introduce herself, and I feel like there's technology and there's new ways that you can connect to school teachers. Shout outs to her for that as well. So. But I think, the other hard, tricky part of all of this is that there are kids who really do need therapy and do need services. And, I think if we look at the news right now, it's sort of sharing this sentiment that it's really difficult to access. There's long wait lists, and there is some truth to that, but we are seeing pockets of certain agencies having openings. And so this is where I really want to support families the most, is helping them figure out where to go, where to look for appointments, and knowing that if you're looking for a therapist, there's a whole bunch of referral lines. NASW has a referral line in Massachusetts.
What does that stand for?
National Association for Social Workers. Psychology Today is a website. You can shop for a therapist with your insurance. There's a project called Project Interface that, depending on your town, can help you get a referral. But what is new in Massachusetts, which is a brand new door, which we have to talk about, is it's called the Massachusetts Behavioral Health Helpline. 24/7 access. You can chat with them. You can also call them. And the website is www.masshelpline.com. I sound like an advertisement.
That's right. Let's say
However,
masshelpline.com. Masshelpline.com.
Really important. Because they can help do some of these things around care coordination and help people figure out what they might need and where they could go. It is brand new. So we're excited about that. And then on top of that, in Massachusetts, 25 behavioral health centers have just opened. And they're on this website, there's a map of where they all are. They have appointments. And what we're trying to do is have people be seen soon. And maybe, Marcus, you can help me talk about like why this matters so that we aren't seeing kids coming to the emergency room or to other places, right?
And
so
that's the last place you want to be.
We want to try and prevent that from occurring, although it is necessary at times.
Yeah.
And we're really trying to have kids come into treatment when they need to earlier, when we can do and have them go through all those multiple doors a lot easier, have them sort of meet with a provider and do group psychotherapy, get school-based services. We want them to be able to do that earlier and see soon before things escalate, become more intense, become more severe, where it becomes a crisis.
Of course.
I think. So we want to be able to do that earlier so that we can keep them out of those spaces and also keep them going to school.
Yeah.
Keep them interacting with their peers. Keep them managing their day and evening routines as best as we keep them in their extracurricular activities. I think so many times, unfortunately, things build up and there's a crisis. We want to prevent those and be able to intervene earlier. And kids are not doing so poorly, but doing well enough where they can learn and do things.
I think the other disclaimer about these doors is I do want families to know that there's lots of them.
Right.
But many families right now don't know that there's any. So there's many. And then also that you're going to open a door and you're going to go through it and it's not going to be the right door. And that's okay. And I feel like a lot of families are really fatigued on going through multiple doors right now.
Sure.
And so how do we sort of help? We started our program in the schools working on the resilience of kids, really building up. And now we're focused on the resilience of adults. All the adults surrounding kids need this, and sort of thinking about our mental health again, our well-being, but teachers as well, and thinking about how do we make a robust, so I was going to say workforce around kids, but that's not the right wording. But I do think I want parents to know that, like, don't give up, know you're not alone, and try different doors. And even if you find a therapist, many families are saying they weren't the right fit for my family. And so it's kind of like driving a car. You're not always going to take the first one you get. And how do you, I think some families are fatigued then and might want to give up. And so how do we help families realize that this can be a really normal process? It can take some time, get on the wait lists, and ask questions. I do think we started this talk talking about, like, this is something we all have, mental health. But still, people are not talking about it as freely. It's more in the media. It's more like these talks are happening, and I think the pandemic made it really, really apparent that we have a problem. But I do think there's a lot of power in talking in our own communities to other families who have been through this. And so there's another organization I'm gonna commercialize, but they're called PAL. It's a PPAL in Massachusetts, and it's a parent professional advocacy league for mental health, and they help parents sort of think about advocacy and care coordination and navigating the system so that parents have support. If they don't have it in their own, sort of community and friend group, parents can reach out to them as well. So just sort of knowing there's different levels of community that people can search for as they navigate a system that I believe is getting better.
Of course.
I have to believe that, though.
No, absolutely.
Right.
And in the final moments, I think parents should be comfortable, even with all the wonderful resources we have, engaging the resources and the people that you trust around you for guidance is really also important. So community becomes more important. If you are connected to different parts of your community, church, etc., go to those people, seek out support. Those are really great. Your physician, your neighbor who lives over across the street, those are really, really wonderful supports to have you think about going to those resources if you don't know anything about them.
Right.
Because a lot of families don't, and they're like, what is this?
I had no idea.
But other people may, and you may get some guidance saying, it won't hurt.
Right.
Give it a try.
And when you do talk to parents in your community, it's really humbling for me anyway to realize, like, how all of us are worried about our kids in some way, right? And how normal that experience is.
And it doesn't stop even when you're adults.
This is amazing. Well, we are almost out of time, but we've gotten some great questions. A lot of the questions you've already answered, but there was one that I liked that we could maybe quickly talk about. Someone asked and submitted this question: how do I increase confidence when the child failed or thinks he or she failed, either at academics or sports? How do you instill help with confidence building?
So that's a great question. I think one one of the things I start with modeling. So
Yep.
how we manage, and pay attention to the language I'm using, because I'm going to stay away from failing or succeeding, but not doing as well as we wanted to do versus
Yeah.
doing well as we wanted to do. So using your language around those things really helps. I think making sure you praise the small victories that occur along the way to whatever the outcome may be. I think making sure we're engaging and focusing on the process. So if it's an academic piece, it's sort of you're studying, you're learning, you're engaging with your peers, you're engaging with your teachers, versus the outcome being the only source of self-worth or feeling good about things. If it's an extracurricular activity, right, not so much focusing on the outcome of the game or the whatever it is, but you're practicing, you're learning. Learning involves not doing as well as you want to, or
Sure.
falling, or slipping, or missing the ball, or missing the shot. It involves all those things. That's how you get better. That's how you improve. So focus, but also successes. You swung at the ball this time. Awesome. That's a small, we as parents sometimes forget to really focus on the small things our kids do that are triumphs that move us to those bigger goals. So I think one of the things, engaging in the process, focusing on the process, and not so much the outcome of things.
That's amazing. Anything else to add?
I was just thinking, it does feel like we're in a time where there's a lot of peer pressure and a lot of pressure on kids academically. And we were talking earlier about, teaching grad school and having students in the classroom who this is very prevalent, like being the best, and their papers need to be perfect, and sort of the other end of this, So how are we all along the way, I think, really giving messaging that it's okay to just be good enough,
Yeah.
right? And that's a Winnicottian theory. Good enough mother, good enough parent, good enough partner, good enough everything, good enough kid, right?
Yeah.
Like we don't need to strive to be the best. And I think really, to me, it goes back to like knowing our kids, right? Like what's in their constitution, who are they? And then playing on those strengths, because some kids aren't going to have, we all have different strengths in different ways, right? So I think it's a good, time to have those conversations with your kids too, that, they're what's realistic for who they are.
Yes.
And their genetic makeup.
Absolutely.
And their social skills and what they're bringing, because I think there is a lot of unrealistic pressures from the outside coming in. And how do you, I feel like as parents, it is our job to protect kids from that and also allow them to, I like that you're not using the word fail, but also make mistakes. And I think modeling that as a parent is incredibly important too, like we talked about before.
Right.
I just screwed up, or the paper we tried to publish didn't get published for 8 times, but we kept trying, right?
No.
Because sometimes our kids do look at us and think like, oh, we do have it easy, right?
Yeah.
But we're all navigating different challenges, and how are we sharing those challenges with our kids?
sharing,
Not just that life is easy and the successes. And I think I don't want to downplay, like we need to talk about celebrations and wins
absolutely.
all the time.
Absolutely.
But we also, I think this other aspect is what is challenging, and then how do we sort of work with that and have skills to manage and cope.
And then, you talk about peer pressure and all, that's there. So sometimes you want your home to be a haven away from those things as best as you can, which is another way that helps kids move through when they don't do as well or as they want to do.
Right.
Because it's not in our face. We're home. Okay. We can recalibrate, figure it out, problem
Take a
solve,
breath.
and go to the next one.
Yeah.
And I think those are also really important as well.
Amazing. This has been a great conversation. I've learned a lot. I hope you guys have learned a lot watching on YouTube. Any final thoughts? You've talked about lots of great resources and doors that parents can open, and the idea of the process rather than the outcome. And then I love just sharing a parent's struggles, frustrations, mistakes with your child to share that, hey, I'm in this with you. Any final thoughts?
Both looking at each other.
Or we covered it.
I think we said so many things that are important, but like mental health, just knowing this is in I just think that's the take home. It's in every home.
Every home.
Feel okay to talk about it.
Yeah.
And the more we do, I think the better off we all are. And, I think that's my...
And my only comment is that parents out there, your kids better than anybody else in the whole world. You're doing wonderful jobs. As they're adjusting, you adjust. And you just want to keep them moving in the way they are. But again, you know them better than anybody else in the whole world.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr.
you.
Shella Dennery. Dr. Marcus Cherry.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us. And I just want to share that this will be archived on our YouTube page for Boston Children's, as well as there are lots of resources on our Answers blog on our Boston Children's website. Thank you for joining us live. And again, this will be archived. Share the link with your friends and family if you want to share this great information from these two wonderful and warm experts. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.